welcome to today's On This Day in Tudor History. I'm Claire Ridgway. I'm the author of this book, which is actually the inspiration for these videos, On This Day in Tudor History. I'm going to be here every day of 2019, bringing you Tudor trivia, events that happened on this day in Tudor history. Now today I'm going back to 1549, which was of course in the reign of the young King Edward VI, son of King Henry VIII. Now on this day in Tudor history, the 5th of March 1549, a Bill of Attainder that had been introduced into Parliament on the 25th of February received royal assent. Now, this Bill of Attainder was against the young king's uncle, Thomas Seymour, Baron Sudeley, and a man who was also Lord Admiral. He'd been arrested on the 17th of January 1549, and he ended up being charged with 33 counts of treason, so rather a lot. Now, as well as being the uncle of King Edward VI, he was also the brother of the man who was leading Edward VI's government at the time, because Edward VI was in his minority, and so his uncle Edward Seymour, brother of Thomas Seymour, was acting as Lord Protector, and so was king really in all but name. Now, what is an Act of Attainder? Because, of course, Thomas Seymour was being found guilty of high treason by an Act of Attainder. Well, it was an Act of Parliament by which a named person, or even a list of people, a group of people, was found guilty of a serious crime such as treason, felony, or misprision of treason. And instead of the person being tried for their alleged crimes, Parliament made a ruling. Parliament sat in judgment on them and ruled on their guilt. Now, an Act of Attainder also provided for their punishment, and it would also include the forfeiture of lands, which would then go to the Crown, and also the corruption of blood. Now, this meant that the person that was attainted, that was found guilty by Act of Attainder, couldn't inherit lands and also couldn't pass lands and titles on to their heirs. That is the bit about inheriting lands. That was in case of them actually surviving the Act of Attainder. But of course, Acts of Attainder from Henry VIII's reign onwards often actually led to the execution of the person that had been attainted. So Thomas Seymour, Baron Sudeley, wasn't tried for his crimes. There wasn't a jury that made a decision. He was found guilty of high treason by Parliament instead, by this Act of Attainder. Now, a record in the Acts of the Privy Council of King Edward VI's reign for the 23rd of February states that on that day, the Lord Chancellor and members of the King's Council had visited Thomas Seymour at the Tower of London and declared to the said Lord Admiral that great and heinous matters and articles of high treason were objected and laid unto his charge, and by manifest means and witnesses confessed and approved. Now, they then went on to list the 33 charges, which included, I'm not going to read all of them because they're rather complicated and very long, but they included that Seymour had attempted to get his hands on the government of the King's Majesty to the great danger of His Highness's person, that he'd used gifts such as money and fair promises to allure the young king to his heinous and perilous purposes, that he'd intended and tried to take the king into his own hands and custody, i.e. that he had attempted to kidnap the young King Edward VI, that he had promised the marriage of the king at his will and pleasure, In other words, he had made arrangements for the king to marry, that he'd retained young men and yeomen to a great multitude and far above such number as is permitted by the laws and statutes of the realm to help him in his evil intents and purposes, that he had attempted to marry the Lady Elizabeth, that's the future Queen Elizabeth I, the king's sister, both before and after his marriage to Catherine Parr. And then there were also charges relating to his position as Lord Admiral. They accused him of maintaining pirates and taking the spoils from the pirates and distributing them among his servants and his friends, rather than taking these goods and giving them to the crown. Now, when the council then put these charges, these 33 counts of treason, before the young King Edward VI, he said, "We perceive that there is great things which be objected and laid to my Lord Admiral, mine uncle, and they tend to treason. And we perceive that you require but justice to be done. We think it reasonable, and we will well that you proceed according to your request." So the king was happy for his council to proceed with the Act of Attainder, with these charges against his uncle Thomas Seymour. The bill was then put before Parliament. Parliament heard the examinations, the depositions, the witnesses, and they declared that the said offences were in the compass of high treason. The record then states, "When no man was able to say the contrary, being divers times provoked thereunto by the Speaker, the nether house being marvellous full, almost to the number of 400 persons, not 10 or 12 at the most giving their nays thereunto, the bill was there likewise passed and assented unto the 5th of March. So the House of Parliament was full, brimming full, and there were only 10 or 12 out of the 400 that said no, that opposed the bill. So the bill was therefore passed and given royal assent on the 5th of March 1549. Thomas Seymour, of course, went on to be executed for high treason. He was beheaded on Tower Hill on the 20th of March 1549. Now, as I mentioned, one of the charges against him was that he attempted to kidnap his nephew, King Edward VI. And I'm going to give you a link to my video for the 16th of January, the On This Day in History for the 16th of January, because that's all about that event, that alleged attempt to kidnap the young king. So I'll give you a link to that. So that's what happened on the 5th of March 1549. The Bill of Attainder against Thomas Seymour, Baron Sudeley, was given royal assent. It's sad that this man who, had had such a wonderful career before that, and who'd been married to Catherine Parr, the Dowager Queen, had come to this low point. It's such a sad end. Anyway, I'll be back tomorrow with another On This Day in Tudor History. You can subscribe to this channel by just clicking around there and hit the bell to be notified of future videos as well. I really do appreciate your comments and all the likes that you give me. I really, really do appreciate them. Thank you for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.